welcome to Astrology 101 with Grounded Astro. You are listening to Lady V. Thank you for stopping by today. So in this video, we're going to go over the basics of your birth chart. Have you ever felt totally detached from your astrological sign? We see a lot of memes, we read a lot of magazine articles, we hear a lot of people's experiences about what the different signs are like, what they do, and how they function. People tend to get a firm idea set in their minds about what each sign looks like when it's played out in life. But what happens when you read or hear something that contradicts what you know to be true about your own personal experience? Great question. That is where the entire natal chart comes into play. Not every Aries is aggressive. Not every Taurus is stubborn. Not every Gemini is flighty. Not every Cancer is a crybaby. Not every Leo is attention hungry. Not every Virgo is a perfectionist. Not every Libra is two-faced. Not every Scorpio is a demon. Not every Sagittarius is rude in their bluntness. Not every Capricorn is a workaholic. Not every Aquarius is a know-it-all. And not every Pisces is delusional and truth-challenged. Now that we've covered those stereotypes, let's talk about the way that energy flows around the chart. So we're starting at the very, very beginning here, the most basic of basics. So everyone has a natal chart. It's essentially a map of the sky, a snapshot of what the sky looked like the moment that you drew your first breath. And all of the luminaries and planets are sprinkled throughout that map. And where they fall indicates where their energy shows up in your life. The vantage point of this map can be a little confusing. It's calculated and drawn from our viewpoint on Earth, but when we look at the chart itself, it's essentially flipped horizontally. It's sort of mirrored, like from an aerial view looking down. We know that for the cardinal directions on a compass rose, north is up, south is down, east is right, and west is left. But the eastern horizon on the natal chart is positioned and represented on the left. So like I said, it's sort of mirrored if we're getting super duper technical. This is important to know because of the ascendant, which I'll explain more about later on in the video as we go through. But for now, you just need to know that each chart is as unique as a fingerprint. But like I mentioned earlier, there are stereotypes associated with each sign, as you probably are well aware of. And honestly, I think it's sad to see signs get yanked through the mud like that. People will pass on potential love matches or friendships or even business partnerships because they have a skewed view of someone's astrological sign. But the sun sign is such a tiny part of someone's full chart that it's a totally unfair judgment. Each sign, like each person, has positives and negatives about it. I don't care what anyone says, no two signs are exactly the same, period. What people are usually referring to when they use sweeping generalizations like that is what's known as the archetypes. Archetypes are based on the original story of each planet and luminary, the purest form of the signs that they rule. But each person within each sign will have varying levels of concentration and manifestation of that archetype, if that makes sense. For instance, each Aries will manifest varying levels of assertiveness and initiation, but it depends on what Aries and Mars, which is Aries' ruling planet, are doing in each individual's chart. They could be placed in more subdued areas of the chart, or they could be right smack dab in the center of someone's personality. It just depends on the person. So as I go through each sign, house, and planet, I'll be explaining those archetypes and a little bit of how they might appear on the subtle side and how they might appear on the exaggerated side, and hopefully put some of those misconceptions to rest. If you want instructions on how to get your own natal chart, let me know in the video comments, and I'd be more than happy to make a super quick instructional video about that as well. It's really, really simple, and it's even a little fun. I mean, who doesn't like finding out more about themselves? So in astrology, we divide the natal chart, remember, the map of the sky, into 12 parts, and we call those parts houses. I personally prefer to use the equal house system, as my research has proven it to generally be the most accurate, and it honestly just makes the most sense to me personally. So there are various systems that you can use to calculate someone's chart, but under the equal house system, each of the 12 houses are equal in size. So if a circle is 360 degrees all the way around, each of the 12 houses contains 30 degrees. So they start at 0 and they go up to 29. That's kind of important to note. They do not go from 1 to 30. Again, they go from 0 to 29. So the bottom half of the chart speaks to the more personalized aspects of ourselves. It's more so how and what we internalize. And the top half of the chart speaks to our place within society, how we relate to other people, and how and what we externalize. So these are the original house rulers, the sign and planets that rule each house. The bottom half of the chart, houses 1 through 6, are ruled by what we call the personal planets. And they're literally just the luminaries, which are the sun and the moon, and the planets in our solar system that come before Jupiter. So Jupiter to Pluto are all of the planets that represent our place within the collective, how our generation behaves and what it values. The exception to that rule, as I'm sure you can see, is house number 7, which is the Libra house. It's ruled by Venus, and Venus is technically a personal planet, but in this house, it represents the people that we value. So it's an externalized part of Venus. So I'll get into all that more as we go along. So planets or luminaries placed in the personal houses will make those energies more personal to that person. And planets or luminaries placed in the external houses will make those energies more externalized in that person. So for instance, someone with a sun in the first house, the sun is our personality. And like I mentioned, we'll go over this in more detail later, but a sun in the first house is going to be very aware of self. They're probably very firm in their personality. They shine very brightly with their personality. They're very gregarious when they meet people. Whereas someone with a sun in the 7th house, which is the house of long-term relationships, that person is going to be a bit more shy, typically. They see their relationships as being where they want to shine the brightest. So that's just a tiny little glimpse of what we'll go over in detail later on. But it's important to note that depending on where the planets and luminaries are, you're going to be a completely different type of person depending on those things, if that makes sense. I hope I'm not confusing you. So anyway, back to what we were going over. So if we divide up the chart into 4 equal parts, we have 3 houses per quadrant, right? So the starting house of each quadrant, the first house of Aries, 4th house of Cancer, 7th house of Libra, and 10th house of Capricorn, are called angular houses, and those are cardinal signs. They have initiating energy. They're the first of each quadrant in the wheel for a reason. So each house, regardless of what that house itself represents, has a shared initiating energy to it. Cardinal energy is a creating energy. It's spearheading. It starts projects and initiates things, whether that's relationships, work connections, hobby projects, whatever. Fixed signs are more stubborn. They have lasting power. They persevere and are determined to keep going. Fixed signs make up the succedent houses and come after cardinal angular houses. They just build on the energy and or projects that were created and started in the houses that came before them. The fixed signs are the 2nd house of Taurus, the 5th house of Leo, 8th house of Scorpio, and the 11th house of Aquarius. These signs and houses resonate persistent energy and they're long-lasting. They don't like change, but they support and they provide. They're kind of like pillars in that sense. They love to support the people in their lives, basically. And finally, cadent houses are for the mutable signs. The 3rd house of Gemini, 6th house of Virgo, 9th house of Sagittarius, and 12th house of Pisces. They represent ending those projects that were begun and sustained in the houses that came before them. It's interesting to note here that even though there's a finalizing type of energy in these houses and signs, they're still mutable, which means they're fixable. They can absorb changes, even drastic changes, much more easily than, say, the fixed signs. Mutable signs can go with the flow and alter course with ease. So each chart starts with the rising sign. The rising sign, or ascendant sign, that's just another name for the same thing, is the sign whose constellation was rising on the eastern horizon the moment that you took your first breath. It sets all of the houses, such as which sign rules each one of your houses and the degree at which each of your houses begins. So remember the original house rulers? Well, when it comes to the natal chart, the original house ruler's energy is mixing with the energy of the sign that rules your houses. So here's a little example chart. I just put random information into the generator and this is what we got. So this person has a Libra rising or a Libra ascendant. So Libra's constellation was rising on the eastern horizon right at 5:30 a.m. from the vantage point of Chicago, Illinois in the United States, the moment that this person took her first breath. So her Libra rising is at 8 degrees, which is a Scorpio degree. When it comes to degrees, that's a bit of a more advanced topic in astrology. And despite appearances, I'm really trying to make this video as simple as possible. So we'll save degrees for another day. But let me know in the comments if you want a video about degrees. I'd be happy to oblige. So one aspect of house degrees that I will mention, because I think it's important to know, is that whatever degree the rising sign is at, each subsequent house also starts at that same degree in the equal house system. So this indicates a general aura of something throughout the many parts of someone's life. It's like a consistent theme, if you will. So if each house represents the areas of someone's life, their childhood, to their relationships, to their work ethic, and so on, the degree that starts each house will lend a little bit of that energy to each area of someone's life. So with our example, her Libra rising at a Scorpio degree will give a little tinge of Scorpio energy across the areas of her life. So we'll talk more about Scorpio specifically as we go over, the 8th house. So rest assured, we will go over this in more detail. So the rising sign represents what you see listed here. Now, in each of the lists that you'll see throughout this video, just know that these are not all-inclusive lists. They get the job done and get the point across, but just like everything else in astrology, once you start peeling back layers of something, you find even more to learn, which I think that's really cool. If you ask me, I'm just an eternal student, but I know to some people that can get kind of irritating. So if our rising sign or ascendant sign is our immediate interaction with the world around us, and is the starting point of the chart, planets that fall really close to someone's rising sign on their chart are usually going to have a prominent manifestation in that person's character, how they immediately react to things, and it can even show up in their appearance. So as we go through each sign, you can use this basic foundational information to understand what it means to have different energies here. So on to the first house. The first house is ruled by the first sign of the zodiac, Aries. Mars rules Aries and is the original ruler of Scorpio. So it still co-rules Scorpio, but we'll go over that more later when we get to the Scorpio 8th house. But Mars represents what you see listed here. It's our aggression and independence, the warrior within us all, how we go about meeting our guttural, basic, instinctual needs. This is why a lot of people see Aries as so aggressive and in your face. Aries is fighting for survival and to meet its most basic needs. And it's no wonder why Aries is so independent. Mars is the only planet from our perspective on Earth to appear to move in its own separate orbit. Now, obviously it doesn't because we are all lassoed into the sun's gravitational pull. However, from our vantage point, like I said, on Earth, Mars appears to move in its own separate orbit, which is really funny to me. Mars is exalted in Capricorn and it falls in Cancer. Okay, so rulership energy, like we mentioned, Mars rules Aries and it rules the first house. So that is what some might call a domicile or home position. It's where a planet or luminary is most comfortable. Mars is most comfortable in Aries because Mars and Aries coincide in their purpose and the way that they manifest. Mars in Aries just makes sense. So Mars is our warrior, our aggression, right? And Aries is the exact same thing. So exaltation energy is a higher vibrational energy for that planet. It's where that planet can just explode in its identity and its purpose and, exaltation energy brings to that planet something that it needs. For instance, Mars being exalted in Capricorn, it takes that fiery initiating energy of Mars and puts it to work to make it productive, like a Capricorn. Capricorn brings structure to Mars traits and brings refinement to Mars capabilities. In exaltations, the sign is bringing something to the planet, right? The planet needs that for growth and to reach its highest level of potential, or at least a higher level of potential than it would in, say, the rulership type of energy. Now, falling energy is just what it sounds like. The planet or luminary doesn't do well within that sign. That's where the planet is at its weakest point. The falling sign is on the opposite side of the exalted sign on the chart wheel. So if the exaltation is when a sign brings out the best in the planet and kind of gives it what it needs to mature, the falling position is when a sign brings out the worst in the planet. Mars doesn't like to be in Cancer because Cancer is driven by feeling and Mars is driven by instinct. You could think about it like this. If Mars is the warrior within us and soldiers often function in fight or flight scenarios, that's not really somewhere that we can stop and think about how we feel. So hopefully that makes sense. Mars falls in Cancer. So if you have Mars in Cancer, you're going to have a harder time being independent and being able to fully realize the positive traits that come with Mars. So in our example chart, she's got Mars in Gemini in her 9th house. So her Mars energy is manifested through the characteristics of Gemini. And this is all at the 14th degree of Taurus. So it adds a bit of Taurus energy here: stubbornness, beauty, financial stability. And the area of her life that this energy shows up in is things involving the 9th house of philosophy, higher learning, religion, and so on. So next up, we have the 2nd house. Venus rules the 2nd house of Taurus and the 7th house of Libra. We'll talk about the 7th house attributes of Venus later when we get there. But as for the 2nd house attributes, the Taurian side of Venus, and that is what we'll focus on here. So Venus represents what you see listed here. It's a superficial planet focusing on outer beauty and sensual things, not sexual like Mars or Pluto energy, but sensual things involving the literal 5 senses. Venus is what we like, what we want to attract into our lives, and how others are attracted to us. So it's no wonder why Taurus and Libra are so slow moving. Venus is the slowest moving planet in our solar system. The 2nd house is the house of family, money. The 10th house is how we generate money through our career, but the 2nd house is still part of our foundation, right? So it's about money we didn't necessarily earn, but money that we've been able to enjoy nonetheless. Yes, Taurus is extremely hardworking, but again, the 10th house is where we see what comes of our career, how we build financial wealth for ourselves. The 2nd house also rules values, tangible things, priorities, things we like, and so on. Both Venus and the moon are feminine, receptive energies, but they're different in the sense that Venus is what we want and the moon is what we need. We'll dive into the moon when we get to the 4th house, but the Taurus side of Venus, like I said, is all things beauty, self-indulgence, tangible money, sense of self-worth, because it's the 2nd personal house, and physical pleasure. So Venus is most comfortable when it falls in Taurus or Libra within someone's house, since it rules both of those signs. Taurus values things and Libra values people, and Venus enjoys being in these signs because it brings a lot of pleasure, physical and within relationships. But Venus is exalted in Pisces and it falls in Virgo. Remember, exaltation is like the sign is giving the planet the tools that it needs to be its best self. So Venus is exalted in Pisces because when Venus falls in the spiritual sign of Pisces in someone's chart, it takes love to the highest possible level. Love, at least the kind that you want to last, shouldn't be superficial and surface level and based on fleeting, unpredictable things. Venus is the physical pleasures and wants, right? So when it comes to the level of the highest self, Pisces, it can be sacrificial. It can let go of wanting things to be perfect. Pisces accepts people exactly where they are, because Pisces is a little bit of all the signs that come before it. It's the 12th sign of the whole zodiac for a reason. It comes last because it brings everything together. So love on the physical level is awesome. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, but love on a spiritual level is a whole extra. It's like a master class of love, if you will. So it just takes the Venusian things to their highest level. I feel like I'm saying highest level a lot. Sorry. Venus falls in Virgo because Virgo is analytical. So love can't be pinned down to fit into the boxes that Virgo loves to use for compartmentalization and organization. Virgo energy is detail oriented and it notices everything. On the topics of love and trying to acquire what we want out of life, Virgo's analytics can sometimes block the magic that comes with letting things unfold naturally. And for accepting things how they are, like Pisces does, that's a big struggle for Virgo because Virgo sees everything as being able to improve. And Virgo wants people and things to constantly be improving. Love needs room for mistakes and room to be a little messy. You know, we have to know that we can bring our ugliest selves to our partners and know that they'll still love us in the midst of our blemishes. Yes, they'll encourage and exhort us to become better, but we need to be able to have that comfort. You know, come to your loved one in your tatted rags and tears streaming down your face and know that they're not going to pick you apart. So in our example chart, she's got Venus in Libra in the first house. So her Venus energy is manifested through the characteristics of Libra. And that's at the 26th degree of Taurus, adding an extra tinge of Taurus energy here. So again, that's stubbornness, beauty, financial stability. And the area of her life that this energy shows up in is things involving the first house of self, initial reactions, how she appears to the world. A lot of Venus first house people, they were doted on as babies and toddlers because of how gorgeous and adorable and sweet that they were. And they typically grow into attractive and pleasant adults. It all depends on aspects because aspects indicated by the little colored symbols in the chart below and by the little colored lines on the wheel, these indicate how these energies get along. So I'm just covering the basics of what the positions indicate. I'll save aspects for another video if, again, anybody watching this wants to request that in the comments below. So yeah, now we are on to the third house. So Mercury rules the third house of Gemini and the sixth house of Virgo, and it represents what you see listed here. Mercury rules information processing, early education, siblings and your neighborhood, organization, daily tasks. It's no wonder why Gemini and Virgo are so quick-witted. Mercury is the fastest orbiting planet in our solar system. Mercury's proximity to the sun on someone's chart also indicates how quickly thoughts materialize from the brain to the mouth. Mercury and the sun, of course, will always be pretty close to each other on the chart, but the closer that they are, that typically indicates a really fast talker. They don't really have much of a gatekeeper on that mouth. They're typically pretty witty, and they want to fill empty space with words. They usually pick up tasks really quickly, especially those involving the hands. And on that subject, let me know if y'all want a video about the body part rulers. That's a fun one. So anyway, the further Mercury is away from the sun, it typically indicates someone who thinks before they speak. They may be much slower to form sentences, or they also might be a little bit clumsier as well because Mercury rules dexterity and coordination. So, and that's another funny thing because when Mercury goes into retrograde, a lot of people have, you have a lot of trips and falls and little accidents because, again, Mercury rules dexterity and coordination. So the further Mercury is away from the sun, the less light it gets from the sun's rays. So dexterity and coordination may be a little bit more, quote, in the shadow, so to speak. Mercury is about the give and take of information, communication, and movement, getting from one place to another, in a conversation or physically, like going to run errands. The third house is the house of the mind, siblings, neighborhood, early education, basic, straight to the point communication. The third house of Gemini is often referred to as a boring house by a lot of astrologers because it's the mundane, day-to-day humdrum of life. Like, I woke up, I brushed my teeth, and I worked out. Then I showered and went to work. On lunch, I went out to eat. I sat in an hour of traffic after work. Then I took my kids to ice cream after I picked them up from school. And I ran errands before I made dinner. Blah, 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 blah. Mercury rules short distance travel. So this is also why some believe that car accidents are more common during Mercury retrograde periods as well. And so why we can also hear about technology hiccups and problems. So the Gemini side of Mercury is about flighty conversation, the more playful, humorous side of Gemini, whereas Virgo is a bit more practical and serious, being an earth sign. Gemini is an air sign, right? So it's very mentally stimulated, and it's more focused on the here and now. That's why it rules the third house, like we just went over. So obviously, Mercury is most comfortable in Gemini and Virgo, which are the signs that it rules. But Mercury is exalted in Virgo. Virgo brings a depth to Mercury that Gemini, in its innocent but immature nature, cannot provide. Virgo knows what things are important to learn and to talk about, and it brings out the organization that's needed for everyday living in health, mental and physical. Mercury falls in Pisces because Pisces, being a spiritually really deep water sign, and it rules the 12th house of hidden things. Pisces is ruled by Neptune, right? Which is the planet of delusion and fantasies and dreams, what you wish for. So when we communicate, we want that to be clear, not misconstrued or twisted or delusional. We want communication to be on a practical level, not deceitful or prone to dishonesty. Mercury doesn't like to be in Pisces because it needs messages to be straight and to the point, focused and practical and above board and honest. So in our example chart, she's got her first house Libra Mercury directly on top of her sun in the 28th Cancer degree. So her Mercury energy is manifested through the characteristics of Libra. And the area of her life that this energy shows up in is things of the first house of self, identity, and first impressions. So this is someone who has no filter whatsoever, and she's noticed for the way she communicates. She doesn't hesitate to defend her ego with her education and with her words, if this was a real person. So next up we have the fourth house. The moon rules the fourth house of Cancer, and it represents what you see listed here. The moon is our intimate, our most intimate, most tender, vulnerable part of ourselves. It's where we need the most gentleness from others, where our emotional instincts come into play. It's the way that we need and provide nurture. It's no wonder Cancer is about staying close to home. The moon is the closest of all the astral bodies in proximity to us on Earth. Out of all the luminaries, planets, asteroids, and other astral items that are on the chart, the moon is the closest to us. So it makes sense that Cancer is about the deepest, innermost protected and close parts of ourselves. The fourth house is the house of home, self-care, the mother, femininity, emotional foundations. It's our very roots, what anchors us to this life. The moon is exalted in Taurus and it falls in Scorpio. Now, Taurus and Scorpio are opposites on the wheel, but can make an incredibly powerful team. I know off the top of my head at least 3 couples wherein one of them is the Taurus and the other is the Scorpio. These are just sun signs, but these couples are very long-lasting power couple type status. It's really cool to see because Taurus provides stability to Scorpio. Scorpio's deepest fear is being left alone. Don't get it twisted. Scorpio likes solitude, of course. It thrives in it. But only when Scorpio chooses solitude. If solitude is thrust upon Scorpio, it's much harder to swallow for this tender sign. And Scorpio provides a depth to Taurus that Taurus, being an earth sign, needs in order to see things from a more fluid, deeper perspective than just the surface earth level, if that makes sense. Scorpio, being water, softens the harder edges of earthy, solid, immovable Taurus. So where is the moon's place within these energies? Interestingly, the moon is exalted in Taurus for some of the same reasons that Taurus meshes so well with Scorpio. Taurus provides stability, protection, and provision. And in this case, that's being given to the emotional nature, the moon. Taurus is the type to stick it out in relationships, often to their own detriment, staying in relationships long past their expiration date. But truth be told, the moon nature needs this level of stubbornness. The kind of stubbornness that says, no, I'm not going to let you wallow in that pain. No, I'm not leaving you, no matter how hard you try to push me away from that innermost part of you. You know, Taurus is rock solid like that. The moon falls in Scorpio because Scorpio is so deep and so much of Scorpio is hidden. The moon needs to reflect, right? And it can't reflect that which is hidden. Scorpio is hidden because that's where it thrives, where it feels the safest. And that's where it can process and understand things without running the risk of being exposed while they're making up their mind about something. But not having access to someone's truest nature may feel off-putting, and it can create doubt in the people who are on the receiving end of that. The moon doesn't always feel safe in those deep waters, and in some situations, the moon can feel a little too safe. That is to say, the emotional nature can become so hidden in someone with a moon in Scorpio. The moon is untethered in that scorpionic, uncharted territory. The moon needs predictability and consistency and stability. And Scorpio, while it's more than capable of providing all of these things, it can often lack the confidence to execute them. And Scorpio takes so long to trust that it can even become the purveyor of its own doom by creating secrecy, which of course causes distrust. Emotional stability and secrecy are antonyms, right? They cannot coexist together in a healthy environment. And this is why the moon falls in Scorpio. It doesn't like being in Scorpio. And Scorpio energy can bring out the worst in someone's moon nature. So in our example chart, her moon energy is manifested through the characteristics of Sagittarius. And the area of her life that this energy shows up in is things involving the third house of communication, information processing, short distance travel, and so on. Her moon is at the 10th degree, which is a Capricorn degree. So there's a sense of discipline to her emotional nature. But it's also in wild, fiery, and ever-curious Sagittarius. So this is a confident, fun-loving placement. Excuse me, they're goofy and warm, and they don't typically embarrass easily. This is a great position for someone motivated toward entrepreneurship because, as we'll go over a bit later, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So something important to mention in the fourth house is the IC, which just stands for the Imum Coli. It usually falls in someone's fourth house, but not always. In our example chart, her IC is in her fourth house in Capricorn. So she has a very firm, solid, but probably very strict foundation. Capricorn, being ruled by Saturn, can indicate some fatherly energy, which we'll go over more when we touch on Capricorn in the 10th house. So sometimes fourth house Capricorn it can indicate a bit of a strict relationship with the father. So, but you know, that's a good basis to build upon, right? Dads are supposed to be strict. They're supposed to enforce rules, but also be really fun, right? That's the quote unquote ideal characteristic that indicates a father. So, but anyway, so if the bottom half is how we see ourselves, our childhood, how we relate to our siblings and families and neighborhoods, how we learn, our daily routines, and learning the foundations of life, essentially. And then the top half of the chart is what we build with that. So that's how we use what we've learned to find our place in the world and to make a difference in our own little corner of the globe. The bottom is the roots, and the top is the flourishing tree. So the opposite end of the IC is the MC, the medium coli, but we'll go over that when we get in the 10th house. So essentially the IC is that anchor, and it propels into the MC, what you make with your life, your destiny, if you will. Next in line, we have the 5th house. The sun rules the 5th house of Leo, and it represents what you see listed here. It's our ego and identity, the way we manifest our personalities. So like we mentioned before, wherever the sun falls in someone's chart is where they want to shine the brightest, where they want to bring warmth and inject life into. The sun brings warmth and life and sunshine, right? It's no wonder Leo energy is so gregarious and basks in attention. The sun is the largest body in our immediate solar system, and it's fixed. It's the direct center of it. Leo loves being the center of attention. So the 5th house is the house of romance, fun activities, childlike spirit, and silliness. It's not a serious house. It's just here for a good time. It can also be referred to as the house of affairs and drama. The sun is exalted in Aries, and it falls in Libra. Aries and Libra are opposites because Aries focuses on self and Libra focuses on others. This is why the sun, the ego, gets so much from Aries in that exaltation. Leo being ruled by the sun is because the sun is comfortable there. But it's a fixed sign, and that's a succeedant house. It's not an initiating cardinal energy that pushes the self forward. Aries brings that initiating energy to the ego nature in a way that Leo just doesn't. Leo will bask where it's at. It's chill. It loves the attention for attention's sake. Kind of like being worshipped. If you look at lions in the wild, they're just kind of chilling. They'll get up and fight when they need to and eat, but the majority of their time is spent basking in the sun. So, Aries doesn't really care about attention. I mean, it does to an extent, but not like Leo. Aries cares more about competition, and especially competition against the self. It will burst forward before others to start something, and it just keeps moving. And that brings the sun energy to a higher level. It's not just basking in attention, but seeking to propel oneself in life. So taking that ego nature and really doing something with it, not just chilling and relaxing, but it's about growth. So that's why the sun is exalted in Aries. The sun falls in Libra because, like we just went over, Libra focuses on others for a number of reasons. Libra sun finds itself through experiencing relationships with others. It's interesting to note that both Aries and Libra rule angular houses, but they initiate for different purposes and they get different outcomes. Aries initiates, again, for self, and Libra initiates for others. Both sides of the coin are needed because you need loyalty to self and you need loyalty in relationships and a healthy balance in between. But overall, the sun falls in Libra because the sun struggles to focus on the self, the ego, and identity expression when it's in relationship-centered Libra. Which brings us to the example chart again. Her sun energy is manifested through the characteristics of Libra, and the area of her life that this energy shows up in is in things involving the first house of self, initial reactions, the house of Aries, right? So the sun likes being here in the first house. It's not in its native 5th house, but it enjoys being in the house of self. Her sun is also at the 28th Cancer degree, so there's a family orientedness about her identity nature, a sense of nurture about her. This person would be very likable if she existed, just a fun, loving, bright, bubbly person. Now on to the 6th house. So Mercury rules the 6th house of Virgo, and we went over this earlier with the 3rd house of Gemini, so I'll make this really brief. So just like we talked about, Virgo is the deeper side of Mercury. It seeks to serve and organize and purify. Gemini doesn't really care much about those things. Virgo is highly analytical and detail-oriented, but it goes much deeper with Earth sign Virgo than it does with air sign Gemini. And then remember, we went over Mercury being exalted in Virgo and falling in Pisces, and you can rewind the video for a refresher if you would like. The sixth house is the house of health, fitness, daily routine, and work habits. It's the house of service and how we feel useful, what we do to feel useful. The sixth house is a cadent, mutable energy, and it brings to an end the lower half of the wheel. Remember, we talked about the bottom half of the wheel being the foundation that the top half is built upon. The top half is what we make from what we learned in the bottom half. So there's a lot of maturity and growth that can be had in a good, strong sixth house. There's kind of a sense that you want to learn to be disciplined in lessons of the sixth house under Virgo before you get to the 10th house of Capricorn, where those lessons that haven't been learned yet tend to be played out with more serious consequences, where there's a bit more riding on those results. So just something to keep in mind there. Next up, we have the 7th house. Now, here's another house that has a planet ruler that co-rules another house, and of course, that's Venus. So we've got here the 7th house of Libra. So again, I'll just make this brief, but just like we talked about, Libra is who we value, that part of Venus. We can't just value things in life. To be well-rounded, we need to also learn to value people and connections. And that's what Libra is here for. People often say that Libra has a mantra of everyone is my friend because they can see good in every type of person. They see value in people. And then remember, we also went over Venus being exalted in Pisces and falling in Virgo. And again, you can go back and rewatch that part if you'd like. So the 7th house, like I've been saying, is the house of long-term relationships. This includes long-term romantic relationships and long-term business partnerships. This is also the house of marriage and how you value relationships and other people. This is the house of sharing and how you interact interpersonally. It's the house of balance and equality and so on. It's also the first house of the top half. So next up, we have the 8th house. Pluto rules the 8th house of Scorpio. And like I mentioned before, Mars is also a co-ruler of Scorpio, and it's the fighter in Scorpio. Mars speaks to the part of Scorpio that protects what it feels belongs to it. Pluto rules the part of Scorpio that's hidden and concerned with darker things. Pluto represents what you see listed here. Wherever Pluto falls on the chart, it can kind of darken what it comes into contact with, almost create a blind spot there. And it's no wonder Scorpio energy tends to feel more comfortable in the dark, meaning Scorpio doesn't reveal much of itself to others, at least initially. You know, it depends on the level of relationship that you have with Scorpio energy. But it does prefer to distance itself from others, but it wants just the right adventurer who can handle its volatile and icy atmosphere and environment to come discover it, just like Pluto way out in the darkness. So it makes sense that, you know, Scorpio energy is a lot like that. Scorpio needs someone that will take their hand and dive into those incredibly deep waters without any fear or reservation. So the 8th house is the house of shared resources, aka other people's money. It's the house of sex and intimacy, mystery, death, inheritance, taxes and loans. It's the house of transformation and joint ventures. Pluto is said not to be exalted in any sign, but I think if it were to be exalted in a sign, it would be something focused on truth and loyalty. A sign that prioritizes emotional security and longevity to deal with how long it takes for Pluto to trust and how much Pluto keeps hidden for so long because of that lack of trust in others. It would need to be a very mature sign that can show Pluto that even if trust is broken, everything can and still will be okay. You can work towards building trust again. It's not the end of the world. Light still shines through broken windows, right? Sometimes even more beautifully and with more character than a brand new shiny window. So for a sign to bring out the best in Pluto, which is so dark and deep and focused on sex and death and hardships in life and transformations, I could see Pisces being a good fit. But Pisces is also a water sign, and it doesn't always provide that rock solid, firm position. Something that Scorpio can lean on and really know that it has something to fall back on, if you will. Pisces seeks freedom, and it can have an air of delusion and sometimes even dishonesty because of Neptune's role in Pisces. So, I don't know, maybe not Pisces. Maybe that's not the exaltation for this planet. But I could see Taurus being a good fit. Taurus is tried and true. And, we've already gone over how well Taurus and Scorpio get along and how their opposites attract. So, all things considered, I think Pluto could be exalted in Taurus. Taurus keeps things simple and above board. They're not naturally deceptive or delusional. Taurus is simple, and it's like what you see is what you get, right? So, yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that would be my answer. In the same way that Pluto is said not to be exalted in any sign, it's also said not to fall in any sign either. But I think if it were to fall in any sign, it would be a sign that's already kind of flighty and hard to pin down to one way of doing things. Something that seeks freedom and individuality, even at the cost of relationships or other people. I think it would be an air sign. I think Pluto would fall in Gemini or Libra, because Gemini and Libra are constantly changing their minds and seeking mental stimulation. And Pluto is possessive. It doesn't want to lose what it has, whether that be possessions or a relationship or whatever they stand to lose. Pluto and Libra have something in common when it comes to relationships with other people. And in that sense, I think Pluto would fall in Libra more so than Gemini, because a falling energy brings out the worst in the planet, right? So I think this mixture of energies could lead to an obsession with pleasing others to where there's no authenticity. And it may be hard to recognize that within the self because of that tendency of Pluto to bring a bit of a shadow to wherever it falls in the chart. So I really could see Pluto falling in Libra. And as for our example chart, she's got her Pluto in Scorpio. She's part of the Pluto-Scorpio generation. So her Pluto energy plays out via the characteristics and traits of Scorpio. The Pluto-Scorpio generation is said to be very obsessed with sex. So just a little hint there. I belong to the Pluto-Scorpio generation myself, and I can attest to that. The area of our example person's life that this energy plays out in is in her second house of values. So her Pluto is at the 16th degree, which is a Cancer degree. So there's a tinge of emotional nature and the need for nurture injected into her Pluto. So now we are at the 9th house. Jupiter rules the 9th house of Sagittarius, and it's the original ruler of Pisces as well. So it currently co-rules Pisces with Neptune. But Jupiter represents what you see listed here. It's our optimism and philosophy, inspiration and luck. Where Jupiter falls on the chart is where we can gain wisdom. Jupiter is big picture values, so it's different from Venus in the sense that Venus, like we said, values things and people. Jupiter places value in the bigger picture, in the collective. Jupiter expands what it touches on the chart, unless it's aspected in a restrictive way. So, and like I mentioned before, we can go over aspects in a future video if anybody is curious. So Jupiter moves through each sign in about 12 to 13 months. So this energy indicates the philosophical attitude and viewpoints of people born within about a year of each other. So of course, the energy will vary according to the degree of Jupiter in someone's chart, as well as the aspects to their Jupiter. But it's no wonder Jupiter is about expansiveness. It's obviously the biggest planet in our solar system. The 9th house is the house of philosophy, higher education, religion and law, ethics, long-distance travel, wisdom, and so on. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer and falls in Capricorn. Cancer brings empathy to Jupiter wisdom. It makes sense of Jupiter's expansive knowledge. It brings it to the personal level. Cancer is like someone's roots, and Jupiter is like the wings. Cancer is home. Jupiter is long-distance travel. So wouldn't it be nice to have a cozy, warm, inviting home to come back to after long-distance travel and going out to discover what you really want out of life? Yeah, I think so too. So these energies can also be negatively aspected, almost becoming opposites. Like you can't wait to get away from your home, to get out, to travel, and just go live your own life away from your hometown, away from your family. Jupiter falls in Capricorn because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And Capricorn brings too much restriction and too many rules to Jupiter. The expansive energy of Jupiter doesn't do well when it's being contained. It creates energy blocks. But Jupiter expansiveness can be kind of like throwing a whole pot of pasta at the wall just to see what sticks. Saturn brings a refinement to Jupiter's big picture ideals. So even in falling energy, there is still a lot of room for growth there. I don't want you to see, oh shoot, I have, Jupiter and Capricorn in my chart. I must, have all these problems. No, it's not like that. There are things to capitalize on and things to work on when it comes to astrology. Nothing is a magical potion and nothing is a death sentence. It's just figuring out what everything means in your chart and then adjusting course as necessary, as you see necessary for your own life. So in our example chart, her Jupiter energy is manifested through the characteristics of Leo, and the area of her life that this energy shows up in is in things involving the 11th house of humanitarianism and the collective. And it's at the 11th degree too, which is an Aquarius degree. So there's a little added tinge of rebelliousness and uniqueness here. Quickly moving along, we have the 10th house. Saturn rules the 10th house of Capricorn and is the original ruler of Aquarius, so it co-rules there today as well. And Saturn represents what you see listed here. Something I find really cool about the planet Saturn is that it's all about structure and discipline, right? And Saturn's moons are what keeps its perfect ring system intact and in place. Isn't that crazy? The moons orbit inside and outside of the rings, and they use their gravitational pull to keep those rings beautifully in place and rotating effortlessly around the beautiful planet. I think that is so wild. So it's no wonder Capricorn is so self-contained, regimented, and hardworking. The 10th house is the house of career, reputation, fame, long-term goals. It's the house of men and the father. Like the 4th house is the house of femininity and the mother. So opposite end, 10th house. Saturn is exalted in Libra and falls in Aries. Libra brings fairness and balance to the discipline of Saturn. It keeps Saturn in line with what's right for all sides. Libra brings people together, and Saturn can inject difficulty into where it falls in the chart, and it can shrink what it touches in the chart. So these two energies can build together something that's structured and fair. It might be kind of obvious why Saturn falls in Aries. Aries wants to bolt out and be first. It's a bit immature and sometimes initiates without thinking or planning ahead. Now, Saturn is all about planned, methodical growth under pressure because Saturn seeks to bring income and wealth and stability in that way into people's lives. So it knows what we need. It knows that we need discipline to make that happen. So in our example chart, she's got Saturn in Capricorn in the 4th house of home and family and emotional nature. So her Saturn energy is manifested through the characteristics of Capricorn, and this energy plays out in her 4th house matters. She probably had a really strict childhood, like we talked about before, and home life, and she seeks to provide structure to her own home as an adult. Her Saturn is at the 19th degree, which is a Libra degree. So there will be an added tinge of balance here. We kind of went over that earlier, but it's an added emphasis of Saturn and Capricorn energy when Saturn falls in a Capricornian house within someone's chart. So now the midheaven, or the big MC at the top of the chart, remember this is the opposite end of that anchor, the roots of the IC down at the bottom of the chart. The MC, or medium coli, is the peak of our life. It's our purpose and what we want to be known for giving to the world, our destiny and legacy. So that's always a fun part of the chart to dissect for people. So for our example chart, her MC is at 9 degrees, which is a Sagittarius degree. So she's going to have some philosophy and truth wrapped up in her life purpose. Following along, we've got the 11th house. Now, Uranus rules the 11th house of Aquarius, and Saturn partially rules Aquarius as well, like we mentioned in the 10th house part. Uranus represents what you see listed here. Uranus is our goofiness, our individuality and uniqueness. It's our rebellious nature and how we stand out from the crowd while being right smack dab in the middle of it. It represents the revolutions that our generations bring and what type of revolution that we seek. Uranus is our freedom of expression and freedom of thought. It's our right to ourselves, our right to show who we truly are to the world, if that makes sense. So no wonder Uranus is about individuality. It's the only planet in our solar system that rotates entirely on its side. The 11th house is the house of community, humanitarianism, friend groups, social natures and networks, generational purpose and place. Uranus spends about 7 years in each sign, so it'll be the same Uranus sign for everyone born within that time frame, but it'll vary depending on, again, the house that Uranus falls into in someone's chart and how it's aspected and what degree their Uranus is at. So Uranus is said to be exalted in Scorpio and falls in Taurus. Now, some believe that the outer planets are not exalted in any sign and they don't fall in any sign because they relate to the generational and bigger picture things. But I personally, think that the planetary energies can absolutely come more alive in some some signs. This video is so long, I'm tripping over my words. So again, some energies can come more alive in certain areas and then be dimmed in other signs. So Scorpio brings the ballsiness to stand alone in our weirdness. Both Uranus and Scorpio represent deep and lasting changes, so they understand each other on this level. Uranus wants to see changes and revolution within society, and Scorpio brings core level changes to the darkest parts of ourselves. So Uranus and Scorpio can be known to instigate people, kind of play devil's advocate in an attempt to exhort people to grow and enact the right changes. So, that exaltation, right, is where the sign brings to the planet what that planet needs. So Scorpio is bringing something special to Uranus, that extra oomph of, no, don't hide that weirdness. Don't hide that goofy part of yourself. Keep that as your core. Don't change for anyone. So as for the falling side, Uranus wants individuality to reign and Taurus wants predictability and security to reign. So things that Uranus could care less about. Uranus is very much gypsy energy, the opposite of what Taurus needs to feel safe and secure. Uranus wants to stick a finger in every pie, to try everything. If this job sucks, that's fine, just quit and try something else. Whereas fixed Taurus thrives in a steady, dependable environment, even if it seems boring to others. Uranus doesn't like being in the sign of Taurus for those reasons. So for our example chart, her Uranus is in Capricorn in her 3rd house of communication and information processing. So her Uranus energy is manifested through the characteristics of Capricorn. And the area of her life that this energy shows up in is in things involving the 3rd house. So her Uranus is at the 6th degree, which is a Virgo degree. So this brings with it a tinge of practicality and service. So lastly, but oh so absolutely not least, we have the 12th house. Neptune rules the 12th house of Pisces. And remember, we went over earlier that Jupiter also co-rules Pisces because Jupiter was Pisces' original ruler. But Neptune represents what you see listed here. It's our dreams and fantasies. It represents uncertainty and imagination, dissolution and empathy. It represents our projections and ideals. Neptune can represent our escapist nature. Neptune yearns for presence and peace. It thrives on faith and trust in the process. Neptune's theme is being okay when things around us aren't okay. When things don't go as planned, how we bounce back from that. So the 12th house represents the unconscious mind. It indicates closure and healing, spirituality and solitude, hidden desires, among other things. It's hard to identify what the needs of the planets are that fall in the 12th house because they're kind of inaccessible to the person who has those placements in their chart. So anything here is going to take work. You can usually see things like addictions and affairs in the 12th house, depending on what planets are there and their aspects and everything that's going on in that house. Neptune could be exalted in Aquarius and it could fall in Capricorn. Aquarius could bring individuality to the dreams of Neptune. It sparks truly unique ideals that can accomplish what Aquarius sets out to do, which is change the minds of people, to shake up the system and see what falls out. Aquarius is a little bit of rebellious energy too, and it has in common with Neptune their ability to think outside of the box. Some say that Neptune could also be exalted in Leo because Leo is not a very serious sign and it can infuse a bit of fun and whimsy into the dreams and fantasies of Neptune. Capricorn, on the other hand, is too much restriction to bring onto Neptune. Repression and restriction have no place when it comes to dreams. Dreams are supposed to be enormous and without limits, and restricting that is just not going to work for Neptune, the seeker of freedom. So I could see Neptune falling in Capricorn, but again, some believe that the outer planets don't have these characteristics of exaltation or detriment. So just take my interpretation with a grain of salt, because argument could be made for quite a variety of positions when it comes to the outer planets. So for our example chart, her Capricorn Neptune is in the 4th house of family and home and the mother. So her fantasies and dreams, Neptune, are of career success, Capricorn. Neptune is at the 12th degree in her chart as well, which is a Pisces degree. So, like we just went over, the 12th house is ruled by Pisces and Neptune. So there's an added tinge of more Piscean energy in how this person's Neptune nature plays out. So that brings this video to a close. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a little something, and I hope I didn't completely confuse you along the way. So please put any questions that you have in the comments below, or give me your video topic suggestions. I'd love to know what folks are curious about when it comes to astrology, or maybe some myths about the chart that you'd like me to dispel, or something specific that you want me to dive into. No recommendation is too big or too small. Just lay them on me. If you would like to order your very own personalized natal chart reading, I will leave the information for how to do that in the description box below. So let me know if you have any questions. So just a quick final overview. We have a key points summary here. The house sign, aspects, and degree are what we use to dissect each planet, luminary, and other astral items in someone's chart. The house is where in life the energy is occurring. The sign is the characteristics of the energy. The aspects are how the energy is playing out in someone's life. And finally, the degree is the level of the energy, where action versus inaction takes place. So just as a final note, you are not your natal chart. You're not a stereotype or a statistic. You're a living, breathing human that has free will. You have all the power to choose which path you take in life. Your chart isn't a death sentence, nor is it a magic potion. So if you use this information, just remember that it's just information. You get to choose how it plays out. So you were created for a specific purpose. You have so much promise and value and such an awesome destiny laid out for you. So just go out and shine some light into someone's life today, and come back soon for more astrology. All right, peace.